Hi everybody, it's Miss Banfield. Today I'm going to be walking you through a demonstration on colored pencil techniques. So before we get started, today you're going to need a colored pencil technique handout. You're going to need a red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple colored pencil, a white colored pencil, a colorless blending pencil, and then you're also going to need some rubbing alcohol and a few Q-tips. So before we even get into the front of this handout, I want to review some techniques for applying colored pencil to the paper. So if you remember from the gridding and shading unit, we talked a lot about coloring in a circular motion instead of coloring in a back and forth motion. So here I'm displaying both of those techniques. For this handout, I want you to really try to focus on using that little like scribbly or circular motions when you're coloring, because it creates smoother transitions between colors and just a smoother, more uniform finish overall. So as we fill out this handout today, try to stick with those circular motions and not back and forth lines. So we're going to go ahead and begin at the top of the handout under the section that says color spectrum, and I'm just writing myself a reminder here to color lightly to begin. So if you look at the color spectrum here, we have letters that represent colors. So R equals red and O equals orange. So then there's these spaces in between with two letters. There's RV and there's RO. These are going to be areas where I am mixing other colors. So RV stands for red violet, RO stands for red orange. So I'm going to be having to layer orange on top of the red. In order to layer colored pencils, you have to start off with a really light layer. If you press too hard at first, colored pencil does not want to layer on top of each other. So that's why I wrote myself that reminder to color lightly at first. Under my section where it's just R, it's just red, I can go back in later and add more layers to darken up that red. But especially in those sections where I'm going to be combining two colors, I need to make sure that I'm pressing lightly in order to be able to layer colors. So you can see that I'm doing that here. I've gone in with red, I've gone in with orange, and then in this section where it says RO, I have layered both red and orange. And I'm starting to do that with orange and yellow as well. So I've colored orange in already. I'm lightening up my pressure as I move into that YO section that stands for yellow orange. And then I'm going to go in with my yellow colored pencil and I'm going to blend some yellow into that orange area in order to create yellow orange. Now I'm just continuing to repeat those steps, but throughout my whole color spectrum. So adding green now, and as I move into the yellow-green area, I just make sure to color very lightly and lighten up my pressure so that I'm able to blend those colors better. I'm also keeping in mind while I'm coloring that I'm trying to be intentional with the circular motions instead of back and forth lines. Couple things to remember as you work with the color violet. Violet is another word for purple. They can be used interchangeably. So violet and purple are the same color. Always make sure that you read your colored pencils when you are working with blues and violets because they look really similar. And then as we near the end of the spectrum down here, we're actually going to go back in with some red from the opposite end of the spectrum. This is because the color spectrum isn't always in the form of a line. It's sometimes in the form of a circle. So red and violet do connect on the ends. If it was in a circle, they would touch each other. Alright, so moving on now to mixing complementary colors. We're going to be using the same technique as above where we blended colors, except this time we're mixing complementary colors. So colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. What happens when we mix complementary colors is we get a color that's almost like a brown or a gray, because complementary colors cancel each other out. They make a toned down version of the color or a less vibrant version of the color. So starting off with our first complementary color pair, red and green, I'm just going in on the side labeled red and I'm coloring lightly in a circular motion with red, and I'm lightening up my pressure as I move towards the center. Also notice that I don't color past the center. I'm going to have red and green meet about halfway, and then I will blend and mix them in that little halfway section. So I've colored red, now I'm going in with my green, lightening up my pressure as I move towards the middle. And then once those two colors are meeting in the middle, I'm going to start to do a little bit of overlapping and blending of the two colors. And then you'll notice as I mix them, they're going to start to create this brownish gray color in the center where they overlap. After we've completed red and green, you can go in and repeat those same steps with our other two complementary color pairs, which are yellow and violet and blue and orange. And again, complementary colors are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. They are normally meant to make each other pop when placed next to each other, but when using colored pencils, if we blend them, like I said, we can get a toned down or less vibrant version of each color. So moving on now to color temperature. I'll explain what color temperature means in a moment here, but I'm starting off with coloring red in the center where it says red, and then going in and kind of lightening my pencil, lightening my pressure as I move to the sides that say warm and cool. So on the left, I'm going to be warming up the color red. Now red is already a warm color, but if I add another warm color to it, I can make it even warmer. Whereas if I add a cool color to the color red, I can make a cooler version of the color red. So here's some cool examples of color temperature in action. Even though the object itself is red, we are adding warmer and cooler colors in different sections to show depth and dimension. So the object is red, but they've layered warm colors on top of the highlighted areas to show that they're in the highlight or in the foreground, and they've gone in and added cooler colors to the red to show depth in those shadowy areas. Alright, so now to warm up and cool down our red, I'm going to start on the warm side. We're going to warm up red. So like I said, red is already a warm color, but we can warm it up even more by adding another warm color. So let's review. We've got warm colors and cool colors. Our warm colors are red, orange, and yellow, and our cool colors are green, blue, and violet or purple. So for red specifically, I'm going to warm this color up by adding orange, and the reason I'm doing this is A, because orange is right next to red on the color spectrum, so they will blend together nicely, and B, my only other options for warming up red are adding red, which wouldn't do anything but make it red still, or adding yellow. And hopefully we know that red and yellow makes orange, so I don't want to make orange, I want to make a warmer version of red. So I added orange in order to create red-orange. And then on the opposite side, I am cooling down my red by adding violet. I don't want to choose green to cool this down because red and green are complementary colors, so it will just make brown. And I also don't want to choose blue because mixing blue with red would make violet. And again, I want a cooled down version of red. I don't want a new color. So by adding violet, I get a red-violet. And then moving down to this section where it says modeling forms, this is similar to the example that I just showed. Your areas of your sphere or 3D object that you want to be closer to a highlight should be warmer, and your areas that you want to be more shadowy should be cooler. So we've practiced this before on our gridding and shading unit with pencils, but this time we're trying it with colored pencils. So I'm starting off with my red sphere here, and I'm just lightly coloring everything red. And then I can go ahead and practice now that I know what colors I can add to red to make it warmer and cooler. In my highlight sections where I want it to be warmer, I'm gonna add orange. And in my shadow sections where I want the colors to be cooler, I'm gonna add violet to my red. So moving on, you're going to repeat these steps with all of the rest of the boxes here. For green, green is a cool color. We lighten it up with blue because blue is next to green on the color spectrum, so it will create blue-green. And we warm green up with yellow, again because it's right next to it on the color spectrum, and it will create yellow-green. And similarly for yellow and violet, yellow is warmed up by adding orange, which is next to it on the color spectrum, and cooling it down by adding green, which is next to it on the color spectrum. And then for violet, we warm it up by adding red and cool it down by adding blue. We're going to skip blue and orange for right now because these two are sort of an exception. Both of these colors lie in the middle of like colors on the color spectrum. What I mean by this is blue is a cool color that is surrounded by two other cool colors. So it's really hard to warm up the color blue without getting some muddiness or some toned down colors. Same thing with orange. It's surrounded by other warm colors, so it's really hard to cool the color orange down without it becoming muddy. So what you can do then when you're trying to show depth and dimension when using the colors blue and orange is you can choose which warm color or which cool color you want to add to show the highlights. So for orange, for example, I can choose if I want to add red or yellow to the highlight section to show more warmth. Personally, I'm going to choose yellow because it's lighter and I want this to look brighter and lighter. So I'm adding yellow to my highlight section. And then in the areas where I want to create a shadow, I'm actually just going to use the complementary color of orange. Instead of cooling it down, it's going to dull it down. So as we know, orange's complementary color is blue, so I would use my blue colored pencil in the shadow section to tone down orange, make it look more cool. Same thing with blue. I would get to choose if I wanted to use green or violet in my highlight section to make it brighter. And then in my shadow section, I'm going to use the complementary color of blue, which is orange, to tone it down. And we're finally on to the last section titled Blending Your Colors. Another word for what we're doing here is sometimes called burnishing. So this is blending, but creating a smoothed out version of the blending. So I'm starting over here, a section that I pre-colored, mixing two colors. I created a little gradient here, and I'm gonna try to show a smooth blend of colors using my rubbing alcohol. So I've dipped my Q-tip into just a little bit of rubbing alcohol, and I'm smearing that onto the paper in a circular motion to get my colors to blend together more seamlessly. And finally, onto our last two blending and burnishing techniques. We have got blending using a colorless pencil and blending using a white colored pencil. So you'll notice at the end here that when we blend or burnish with a colorless pencil, the colors are going to be a tiny bit darker than normal, whereas when we blend or burnish with a white colored pencil, the colors are going to be a little bit lighter than they were originally. Just keep that in mind when you're doing this. So I'm going in and I'm using my colorless blending pencil, and I'm just pressing with a little bit more pressure than I normally would because I'm not adding any more layers after this. I'm just trying to create a nice smooth finish and a nice natural blend between the colors. So I'm using my circular motions and I'm pressing a little bit harder than normal and creating a nice blend of colors. And you can see that in the end, the purple and blue that I used appear just a tiny bit darker than they were before. And now I'm just going to do the same exact thing except using a white colored pencil this time. So applying a little bit harder pressure than I normally would and going back and forth with my little circular motions in order to create a smoother transition or better blend between my purple and my blue. And in the end, you can see how using the colorless pencil and the white pencil helped to create smoother transitions between colors and just a nicer, smooth finish overall. And if you'd like to, you can go back to the beginning of the handout and try some of these blending and burnishing techniques in the other areas where we've already applied color. And that's it for our colored pencil techniques. So use these new tips and tricks as you move into your final project if you choose to use colored pencil.